Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've officially made it to SEC play. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to preview that Oklahoma game that's going to start SEC here coming up in this episode. First, we're going to break down the Kent State and South Dakota State games because I have not had episodes talking about those due to the Christmas holidays. So we're going to talk a little bit about those first two games. I can briefly mention football if y'all want, but I don't care to. And then we will move on to SEC play for basketball. As I said, I am going to preview the Oklahoma game as well as do a little bit of a look ahead as to my prediction for SEC play, what I think a reasonable expectation is versus a kind of a prediction. So we will look at that here coming forward, but let's get right into the show. So as I mentioned, we're going to start the show talking about the Kent State and South Dakota State games. They were kind of a tale of two different teams, honestly, in my opinion. The Kent State game really showed how good Alabama can be defensively at times. Alabama did a very good job against Kent State. They didn't have a single guy get over 10 points against them. It really felt like they were locked into the scouting report. Alabama, by and large, just forced the guys to take the shots that they wanted to take and got the shots that we wanted. The only problem was Alabama couldn't hit anything. Right? So Alabama ends up winning 81-54, and it really even felt like, Alabama never felt like Alabama was going to lose the game, but it also never felt like Alabama really took advantage as much as they could have, right? It really felt like shots were not falling. Chris Youngblood goes 2 of 9 from 3. Aiden Holloway went 3 of 8. Phylon goes 1 of 5. The team only shoots 25% as a team from 3. We shoot 50% from the free throw line. Just in general was not a super successful shooting night. Was decent from 2, or was really good from 2, over 70%. But we'll talk about it later. This team is an elite 2-point shooting team. And the real difference was Alabama. As I said, Alabama just could not make a shot, it really felt like. But Alabama ends up winning. It's not really all that close. Alabama wins by 27. And it showed that Alabama can at times do well from a defensive perspective. They did cause 8 steals. But really the difference in the game is Alabama dominated the glass. 20 offensive, 40 defensive. Alabama just dominated the glass, and it inevitably was the difference in the game. That coupled with pretty decent defense and forcing the shots in which Alabama wanted to force, and Alabama was able to be really successful in that game. So, that's what happened in the Kent State game. I don't think we need to read too much into the game. Alabama was successful. There wasn't a ton, as I said, that we need to read into that game. But, that's how we're going to look at the game. They're able to force the shots they wanted to force, don't allow anybody to get into double figures, play your game successfully. Obviously, if we'd have hit some more shots, it would have been a larger margin of victory, but you're never going to complain with a 27-point win. Then we move over to the South Dakota State game. And the South Dakota State game really was the game that I expected. Alabama played about as well as we have here in recent memory. The only guy who really got going for South Dakota State was Oscar Clough. And if you read any of my preview articles or know anything about South Dakota State, Oscar Clough is an NBA player. I mean, he is an absolute pro. He's been in college for a long time. He has moves down low, and he's a tough assignment on defense, right? I thought that Cliff did a pretty good job, all things considered, defending him. I thought that Grant did a pretty good job, all things considered, defending him. But he is not, the traditional big man that you see in today's basketball. He is more of a, old school big man, and he has the moves to go with it, and he is super efficient. And he got his own. He did it on 18 shots, scores 21 points on 18 shots, 3 of 3 from the line, 15 rebounds, But he was the majority of that team, right? Again, if you know about South Dakota State, that should not shock you. He has been most of them. He leads them in almost every statistical category. So Oscar Clough is just that guy, right? But what you saw out of Alabama was the 3-guard duo. The 3-guard trio. And the 3-guard trio, played about as well as you could have asked. Aiden Holloway goes 8 of 19 from 3. Mark Sears goes 6 of 14 from 3. LeBaron Follins goes 6 of 7 from 2 to go with 6 assists. And it just was an absolutely crazy showing by your guards. Aiden goes 2 assists to 1 turnover. LeBaron goes 6 and 0, and Mark goes 5 and 2. Right. So that's 13 and 3 from an assist to turnover ratio out of your guards. You got to love that, right? So that was really the difference in this game. Was your guards played absolutely incredibly. Grant Nelson as well, played awesome. He, had 17 points, had a couple of long twos that should have been threes that his foot was on the line, as well as Aiden Sherrill also had another one that should have been a 3 but was a 2. But really the difference in this game was Alabama actually shot it decent. Alabama, again, shoots phenomenally well from 2, over 75%. They got 78% from 2. However, they made 19 threes. Really 21 if you look at the one that Grant and Aiden Sherrill both shot with their toe on the line. And, completely different from a shooting perspective out of Alabama in this game. And that's what we'll talk about when we look at what needs to change or what Alabama needs to do going into SEC play. And it's just a slight uptick in three-point shooting percentage. I'm not saying Alabama needs to become the best three-point percentage team in the entire country because of how good their 2-point percentage is. I think that Alabama just needs a slight uptick, back to some of the norm of what we've seen out of Nate Oates' teams and not even out of some of Nate Oates' best shooting teams. But a slight uptick in three-point percentage will go a long way for this team. And I think that we saw it in this game. I think that Alabama proved that they have that ability. They have some guys in Mark Sears, Aiden Holloway. Chris Youngblood still did not shoot super well in this game. He goes 1 of 6. I know he can shoot better than that. Phylon goes 2 of 7. Obviously, we know he can shoot better than that. Stevenson goes 0 of 4. Not exactly sure what's going on with him. Obviously, you gotta kind of keep playing him because he's done so well from a defensive perspective that I think he's earned the ability to be out there. But in my opinion, he's lost any ability to start. I think very clearly that he has to be out of the starting lineup. The one thing I will say about this game, and the thing that people talked about that was a little funny, is Nate had talked about kind of shrinking the lineup. However, he had been playing an 11-man rotation, right? Nate had been playing the 11-man rotation where all of the scholarship guys that were eligible were playing. And the only 2 that weren't were Latrell Reitzel, obviously due to injury, and then Nas Cunningham due to the red shirt. And in this game, Houston Millette had a sickness, and Darion Reed turned his ankle, so neither one of those 2 guys played. And it really felt like because you had a shorter rotation, there was a little bit better shooting because you got more guys into rhythm. But I think it also more clearly showed you who earned more minutes and who didn't. And guys like Mo D, just prove you got to play him, right? Mohamed Diabate, from a defensive perspective, can do anything you need him to do. From a rebounding perspective, he has 7 offensive rebounds. He's just an absolute beast overall, and he really earns more minutes than he gets. So to me, that's what it proves. It also proves, again, I don't think Jaron Stevenson can start. I understand why you're playing him because of the length and because of the quote-unquote efficiency, and you can see him shoot well in practice, and he just isn't doing it in game. He's in a really bad slump. I understand that. But until he shows some ability to make something in a game outside of Vegas, it's really tough to play him. It just really is. I know. Again, you have to play him at certain moments because his defense is good enough to do that. His rebounding at times is good enough. He needs to work on the offensive rebounding, and that's something that Mo gives you that Jaron just doesn't. But that is one thing that we need to see out of Jaron. I think if he'll get back into putting the ball on the floor at times, and Nate talked about it, if he'll put the ball on the floor at times and not rely on just being a catch and shoot guy, I think that it will get a little better for him and potentially get out of his head. But as of this moment, Jaron Stevenson just can't be played. So that's what I want to talk about as it comes to those games. Again, in this game, Alabama showed that steals can lead to offense. You had 10 steals. 6 blocks. Those led to some pretty good offense, and Alabama comfortably wins this game. It was about the margin that I expected, a little bit higher scoring than I'd originally thought. I know my prediction near the end of the game, my prediction, kind of came to fruition with about 5.5 minutes to go. And I was like, yeah, I kind of underthought on this one. So it was exactly as I expected for this game, exact margins and kind of thought process. It just was a little higher scoring than I thought, obviously due to Alabama's ability to hit the threes, and South Dakota State did catch up, or, did play with us. So that's what I have to say about those two games. Not a ton of breakdown, not a ton of analysis, and I know that. We'll go into the SEC games in a little bit more depth, but I just wanted to give a little bit of something because I know I have not talked about those with being out over Christmas time. So let's move into kind of my thoughts overall for SEC play, and then we will give a slight preview and prediction for Oklahoma. So overall, when we're looking at SEC play, I think that there's a few things that you have to consider. I think that you have to consider that, first and foremost, the SEC may very well be the best conference in college basketball that we've ever seen, right? A lot has been made about the fact that the SEC is potentially going to break the NCAA all-time record for most teams ever in the NCAA tournament. That was 11 by the Big East. I think that is a real possibility. I think that there is a real possibility that the SEC gets 12 or 13 teams in. Most projections say that if you're at 8 and 10 or better, you're just about a lock to get in due to how good everyone's strength of schedule is going to be and how good everyone's net ranking already is. So I think that there is a real possibility that no matter your record, as long as you are 8 and 10 or better, you're pretty much a lock. It would not shock me if some 7-11 teams get in. For reference, if you are 7-11, currently KenPom projects that 14 teams are going to be 7-11 or better. I don't think the KenPom projections are perfect, but that just gives you an idea as to what a prediction metric looks at, how many teams potentially are going to hit that number. I do not think 7-11 would feel confident to make the tournament, but I think that there is a real possibility that 7-11 does make the tournament, especially for certain rosters. Every SEC team currently is in double-digit wins heading into conference play, and that is not something that you're going to hear about a lot, and it's just an absolutely incredible conference showing in the non-conference. The stats are off the charts, right? So when I'm looking at, conference play, I think that Alabama's goal when it comes to the SEC conference in tournament this year, the goal needs to be a top 4 seed, right? Obviously, the team goal is going to be to win the conference, right? But a realistic expectation should be a top 4 seed, right? A top 4 seed in the SEC tournament. Would love to have a share or piece of the title, but realistically, top 4 seed. And in my mind, realistically, 14-4, 13-5. Right? I'm looking at you need to win your 9 home games and win more home games or win more away than you lose. Right? Go 5-4 in the away slate. If you go 4-5, it would be okay, but win all your home games, go over 500 in the away, and you finish at 14-4. Right? I think it's completely realistic. I think it's completely possible. If you had to give me, and I guess like, hey, if you had to give me a few games that you think will be tough for Alabama on the road, I think that Texas A&M game in 2 weeks at Texas A&M on a Saturday, I think that's one that you potentially could circle. I think that Kentucky game the next week on the road, I think that one you potentially could circle. I think Texas could be tricky on the road in Austin. And then I think that Tennessee and Auburn to close out the year, the back-to-back on the road, I think that those two are going to be obviously tricky. Now, that's not to say the home game against Florida is not going to be easy. The home game against Kentucky, home game against Auburn. None of these are going to be easy, but in my opinion, you got to defend your home court, right? So I'm going to feel confident in our ability to do so. I think Nate's done a great job of that the whole time he's been here. And so I'm going to say you defend your home court. And those are just a few of the games. If you had to have me circle, 5 or 6 of the games that, I have my eye on that I'm really, I wouldn't say concerned about, but definitely going to keep a very close eye on. Those are probably the games that I would circle. Like I said, personally, I'm going to say probably a 14-4. You win all your home games and you go 5-4 on the road. If you had to have me pick today, I think I probably say Texas A&M, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Auburn, all on the road, meaning that we split with Kentucky and split with Auburn. Us each, home team winning the game. I think realistically that's possibly what happens. Could we win all of those games? Sure, right? I don't think any team is going 18-0, right? I don't think any team in the SEC is going 18-0. Is it possible? Sure. I don't think it's happening, right? I think that 15-3 to 14-4 probably is pretty close to a share of the title. Would it shock me if Auburn was able to go 16-2? No, not exactly. I don't think it would truly shock me. But I think realistically, 15-3, 14-4 is probably a share to winning the conference. 13-5 even could if teams start beating each other up. I could see 13-5 being a share of the title, right? This is going to be a very, very good conference season, and we will see when it comes. I think a few teams are maybe slightly overrated because they have some poor non-conference schedules. Obviously, they've won all their games, but I think the non-conference slates of some teams are artificially inflating how good they are, and we'll see when they actually come to conference play. But if I had to give a guess, I would say probably 15-3, 14-4 wins the conference. Like I said, my prediction for Alabama would probably be somewhere in the 14-4, 13-5 range if I'm guessing today on January the 2nd. So that's my prediction as it relates to the conference play. I do think that Alabama's in a very good shot to potentially win the conference. I think that Alabama's in a very good shot to obviously compete for the lead in the conference. I think that Alabama's in a very good shot to compete for a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, and that the SEC, probably gets 12 or 13 teams in the NCAA tournament to set a record for the most ever. I think that those things are, if everyone performs to the level that we expect, then that's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. I know most bracket predictors are saying around 13 teams currently, with 14 being a possibility, but not super likely unless everyone just beats each other up. Right. So let's move on to the Oklahoma game. I know we talked a little bit about the SEC slate as a whole, but the next game on the schedule is Oklahoma, and they currently host the nation's top winning streak. They have a 13-game winning streak going into this game. They are 13-0. They're one of 4 teams that are 13-0 on the year, and they're really good. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Oklahoma is a very good team. And I think that I wouldn't say overrated, but they are slightly overvalued at times due to the fact that Oklahoma has a very poor non-conference slate. That's not to say they haven't won a couple of big games. They have beaten Arizona. They beat Louisville. They beat Michigan. Right, so they've beat a couple of big teams. However, it's tough to know exactly how good Oklahoma is, because there weren't a ton of those that were back-to-back. The Arizona and Louisville were back-to-back in their MTE, but Michigan, was sandwiched in between Oklahoma State, that's really not great this year, and Central Arkansas, that's downright abysmal. And so it's really, whereas Alabama and Auburn both have played really, really tough slates, and it really feels like what you got out of those teams. And even Tennessee, to a slightly lesser degree, again, they've played a tough slate, what you got. Oklahoma has played a couple of pretty good teams, but a lot of pancakes, right? From a KenPom perspective, and I know KenPom isn't everything, but they have played 6 teams outside of the top 300 in KenPom. Another team that was 266, right? For reference, Alabama in the same time frame has only played 1 team even close to that level, and it was North Dakota at 287, right? So Alabama has only played 1 team even on the same stratosphere as some of the teams that Oklahoma has played. North Dakota would have been the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. like sixth best team that Oklahoma's played, and they were by far Alabama's worst opponent, right? So that's just what you have to look at when you're looking at Oklahoma's schedule, and when you're thinking about is, are they bad? No, right? Oklahoma is a very good team. Jeremiah Fears, and we'll talk about him here in just a second. Jeremiah Fears is absolutely legit. There's a good chance he's a one and done. He has been absolutely incredible, right? Oklahoma is a good team. However, they may not be quite as good as some people think due to that 0 in the loss column. A lot of people are being like, oh, Oklahoma's incredible. And granted, there's only a few undefeated teams, and the fact that they've gotten to this point undefeated says a lot. I think it also partially has to do with how poor the non-conference slate was, right? Because part of the reason why like Alabama loses to an Oregon is they had to play a Houston and a Rutgers before they got there, right? When you take some lumps, or when you go on the road to Mackey Arena, right, when you have a really tough place to play, that makes it a little bit more difficult, right? So that's what I would say as it relates to when we're looking at the teams, in the SEC ACC Challenge, they play Georgia Tech, whereas Alabama gets North Carolina. Not saying North Carolina's great, but I think they're better than Georgia Tech. Auburn gets Duke, right? So it's just not the same level, and I think that should be taken into consideration when you look at this Oklahoma team. I do think, however, Oklahoma, like I said, is a pretty good team. I think that their defense is pretty decent, and their offense, like I said, mostly led by Fears, is absolutely really good. Fears is the guy when you look at Oklahoma that I think is going to get a lot of the praise, a lot of the accolades when you're talking Oklahoma basketball. And for good reason. He ends up winning the game for them against Michigan. Not sure if y'all saw that game, but he ends up hitting a and 1-3 to beat Michigan by 1. It was the difference in the game. He also leads them in scoring. He has 18 points a game. He also leads them in assists and steals, right? So he is a little bit of a do-everything guard. And I wouldn't say a Phylon, but he kind of, in the same way that Phylon is very much a two-way guard, he is that way, right? I would say Fears is a little bit more of a jump shooter than Phylon, but, very much a two-way guy and somebody that really is a freshman that has jumped onto the scene and has been absolutely incredible. The other two guys that you're really going to talk about when you talk about Oklahoma is Jalen Moore and Duke Miles. They're the other two guys kind of averaging over double digits. Moore averaging, closer to 18. Duke Miles, closer to 13. Miles is almost a 47% three-point shooter. Moore is a 38% three-point shooter, right? Both of these guys absolutely can light it up from three. And I think that also the fact that they have played a lot of basketball, right? Fears is the freshman, so he's the one that people are going to, hear, and he's going to get a lot of the accolades and a lot of the praise and hear a lot about him. But Duke Miles and Jalen Moore are two that are going to be, they've played a lot of basketball, and also they're both from the state of Alabama. Jalen Moore from Birmingham, Duke Miles from Montgomery. And I think that matters a little bit because I know, especially like from an Alabama perspective, Mark Sears and LeBaron Phylon, you can tell how much it means to them to play for the university, being from the state. And I know sometimes when you're facing when somebody is facing their old state or old rivals or whatever, that sometimes, helps that person just have a little extra intensity going into that game, right? So that is something that I would say just to kind of be on the lookout for in this game, is that Duke Miles and Jalen Moore both are from the state, and like I said, definitely something that you should kind of keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at this game. I do think that Alabama can win this game even on the road. I was at the Oklahoma game in which Brandon Miller's team lost in this arena. I do not think it is an arena that is incredibly tough to play in. It's kind of in a bowl, but I do think this is an arena that Alabama can have some success in. In that game, Oklahoma just shot the absolute lights out. Does this team have that ability? Yeah, potentially. This team absolutely has that ability, and they are a pretty good 3-point shooting team, over 36%, over 58% from two. This team has that ability to shoot really well. But I do think that Alabama understands, based on what we've seen here recently, the intensity on defense, the intensity in rebounding that just it's going to require to play at the high level competition we need. And I'm not 100% certain that Oklahoma fully is under the understanding of what it's going to take game in and game out, again, due to that strength of schedule. Now, do I think by the end of conference play they could be much better at it? Absolutely, right? But it matters a lot that we're the very first SEC game they're playing, because I do think that they maybe have a slight misconception due to their non-conference slate, right? The thing I will say also when we're looking at Alabama that I want to see, and we talked about it in the South Dakota State game, that 3-point percentage kind of eked up a little bit. It was over 34%. If those two guys, both their foot hadn't been on the line, not been on the line, and they would have counted, I think it would have been over, closer to 36%. When you look at the Alabama teams in the past that have done really well, you would think because of the number of 3-point attempts that we take that the teams had to be an elite 3-point shooting team. And the team that kind of comes to mind is Brandon Miller's team, right? Brandon Miller, people think of him because he was a great 3-point shooter. But his team only shot 33.5% from three, slightly more than 1 point per possession. Last year's team was much better at 37%. But this current team is at 31.7%. However, they are already a better efficiency team because of how good they shoot from two, right? Alabama currently is at 63% from two. It's about 10 percentage points better than Brandon Miller's team was, for reference. If Alabama can even just bump up that 3-point percentage by a couple of percentage points, that leads to 1-2 additional makes a game, and the offense then is that much better, right? I think that the defense has taken a few lumps, but I think part of that is due to playing a few different guys, trying to understand who you need to play and when you need to play them. I think that the defense will be better as we continue on into conference play, and I do think that solidifying the roster a little bit will help that. And I do think that, again, the 3-point shooting is the thing that I want to kind of keep an eye on, because if that number can bump closer to 33 and a half, again, that 1 point per possession number, I think that's really when you're going to see Alabama's offense kind of take some of the strides in which it can. I think this team has the capability of shooting even better than that, because I know this team has that ability to shoot. The question is just, are you going to see it, right? That's really the question when it comes to Alabama. If I'm going to give a prediction for the Oklahoma game, I think my prediction, KenPom has it as an 88-79 win. I do like kind of that rough idea of score margin. I would say maybe a tiny bit lower, like a 7 to 8 point margin, maybe not 9. My score prediction would probably be more in the 91-84 range. I do think that the possessions may be up a little bit, just due to Alabama has done a great job pushing the pace, especially with the multi-guard lineups that we run. There have only been a couple of games this year in which it was lower possessions, and we lost one of those games, and it was on the road. And one of those games was McNeese, where Will Wade really kind of tried to take all the air out of the ball to lose by a lower margin to help his net ranking. Right, I really feel like in the games in which, outside of Houston, right, Alabama's been able to push the pace, and so I do think that Alabama's going to get out and run with the ball a good bit in this one, and so I do think that the possessions are going to be up. So, like I said, I would say probably a 91-84 type margin. I do think Alabama can win this game, and get off to a good start in SEC play. So I will talk about this game. I have a wedding I'm going to over the weekend, so as I mentioned, I will not be in attendance for this one. Unfortunately, sorry, I'm stupid. Complete side note, I said that this was on the road, and I just said that because I'm not going to be there. Completely sorry about that. This game is actually in Coleman. So let me readjust my score prediction. Um, Sorry about that. I had a complete mishap. This game is actually going to be in Coleman, so I do think that Alabama actually probably wins by the 9 to 10 point margin. So let's go. Actually, let's go 91. Let's go 91-82. Yeah, I think the margin's actually okay. Sorry about that. But Alabama Alabama wins this game. Alabama does cover, or does win by a fairly decent margin. I think that Alabama gets off to a good start in SEC play. As I was going to say, I'm not going to be in attendance this game. There's a friend of mine who's going to be using the ticket due to the fact that I am going to be at my college roommate's wedding. So unfortunately, I am going to miss this one, but I will be at the very next home game against Ole Miss. Everyone who is going to be attendance for this one, make it loud. Let's welcome Oklahoma to the SEC. I will say I was still at that original game in Norman when Brandon Miller's team lost and they shot like crazy. But yeah, it was. I think that we need to avenge that loss. So I think that Alabama does win. I think Alabama does play really well in this game. I think that shortening the roster is going to help, and I think that Alabama knows what it's going to take. So that's what my thoughts are. I really appreciate everyone for watching. Sorry for the slight abbreviated / longer episode. I've had a lot going on with Christmas time and then with this wedding coming up. But as soon as I get back, I will be back for good and don't have any trips planned or anything. So we will be back to regularly scheduled programming with probably 2 episodes a week. So let's get ready for SEC play. And like I said, those episodes will be coming out twice a week. And if there is anything you want me to discuss in those episodes, throw them down in the comments. I do read all of those. So I do appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.